During the Second World War in Poland, a young Erik is separated from his mother. While the Nazi officers try to take Erik away, his anger triggers his magnetism manipulation abilities, which bend a metal gate in front of him. A young Erik is taken under control, and now that everyone knows what his power is, Erik will be taken to the higher-ups. Erik meets a cruel Nazi officer named Schmidt. Schmidt says that he sees a lot of potential in Erik, and his powers can help Schmidt in achieving the things he has desired the most. Schmidt forces Erik to move a coin using his powers. Erik is unable to, and Schmidt, being the cruel person he is, brings out Erik's mother and threatens to shoot her if Erik doesn't move the coin. When Erik is unable to, Schmidt shoots Erik's mother immediately. This infuriates Erik, whose powers trigger, and everything metal around him gets destroyed. Schmidt is delighted, and makes it clear that he and Erik will be accomplishing much in the next few years. Meanwhile, a young Charles wakes up in his bedroom after hearing noise downstairs. A brave Charles, thinking it might be a burglar, heads downstairs to confront the person. Charles finds out that it's his mother in the kitchen. However, what really bothers Charles is that his mother has never set her foot in the kitchen in her entire life. Here's when Charles showcases his excellence, which is his telepathy and telekinesis abilities. He uses his powers to get into the mind of the woman pretending to be his mother, and asks her to reveal her true identity. The woman reveals her true identity as a small girl whose skin is entirely blue, and has shape-shifting abilities. Charles is elated, as he had always thought that there were more individuals like him, with special abilities. The name of the girl is Raven, and Charles assures her that she will never have to steal again, and she is welcome to live with him in his house as his sister. Raven is overjoyed, and the two are set to bond for the rest of their lives. Several years later, Erik, now a full-grown adult, is looking for Schmidt, who seems to be alive as well. And after all these years, Erik has kept that same coin Schmidt once asked him to move with his powers. Charles and Raven have grown up as well. Charles seems to be doing great for himself, as he has earned his doctorate from the University of Oxford as Professor of Genetics. One night at a bar, Charles is with another mutant woman, who has heterochromia. Raven is at the bar too, and when she gets bored, she appears and starts to change the color of her eyes, in order to match the ones of the mutant with Charles. After they leave, Charles explains to Raven that her actions can lead to serious consequences of mutants getting discovered, to the point where people could panic. Charles warns his sister to keep her abilities to herself for the time being. Erik goes to a bank one day and meets its owner, who he believes knows where Schmidt might be. When the owner refuses to acknowledge that he knows Schmidt, Erik uses his powers to put the owner in immense pain. The owner tells Erik that he will find Schmidt in Argentina. Erik is showing no remorse to anyone who comes between him and Schmidt. In Las Vegas, CIA officer Moira and her partner are spying on a man named Sebastian. Moira finds out that Colonel Hendry is going to meet Sebastian, and the meeting could be something that doesn't favor the country in any way. Moira finds her way into a club where Hendry has arrived. Hendry meets Sebastian, and it turns out that Sebastian is actually Schmidt, who hasn't aged a day. Moira overhears Sebastian asking Hendry the reason for why he blocked the proposal to position missiles in Turkey. Hendry explains that doing something like that could lead to a deadly war with Russia, as the Russian government would consider this move as an act of defense against them. Sebastian threatens Hendry to reconsider the proposal, and taking Sebastian as an ordinary man is something Hendry would regret later on. Sebastian has surrounded himself with a few mutants: Emma, who has powers similar to Charles, Riptide, who has the ability to produce cyclones, and Azazel, who can teleport. Sebastian threatens Hendry to reconsider the proposal, and after witnessing the people Sebastian is with, Hendry is frightened and obeys what Sebastian asks him to do. Moira has observed every single thing and fears something deadly on the horizon. Azazel teleports Hendry to the rest of the government officials, and Hendry proposes that they should reconsider positioning missiles in Turkey. As Hendry was teleported, no official believes Moira that Hendry was in Las Vegas. As she heard Sebastian talking about genetic mutation to Hendry, Moira starts to think that she should find a genetic mutation expert, so that the rest can also find out that something like mutants exist. Moira finds her way to Charles, as he is the only one who understands genetic mutation perfectly. Erik arrives in Argentina, and at a bar, he notices a photo of Sebastian with two other men. Surprisingly, the other two men are also present at the bar. Erik goes to meet them and has a drink with them. When one of those two men notices the number mark on Erik's arm, which is an indication that he was one of the Holocaust survivors, the man takes out a dagger. Erik, however, uses his power to put down the two men, who turned out to be old Nazi officers, with little to no effort. Moira meets Charles at a local bar and tries to gain his help in the field of genetic mutation. Charles uses his ability to look into Moira's mind and sees what Sebastian is planning to do. In Miami, Hendry meets Sebastian and the rest once again on Sebastian's ship and asks for the money they agreed on. Hendry shows up with a hand grenade and tells everyone that he will pull the pin and blow up everyone on the boat if Sebastian doesn't give him his money in peace. Sebastian pulls the pin out of the grenade himself. The grenade is triggered, but much to Hendry's shock, Sebastian turns out to be a mutant too. Sebastian is able to absorb the energy that comes out of the grenade, and Hendry is stunned by Sebastian's power. Sebastian claims that this power is the thing that has kept him young all these years. Knowing what Hendry is about to do, Sebastian releases the grenade's power onto Hendry, ending him in this process. Moira takes Charles to meet 3 of the biggest government officials, and Charles gives a presentation on how mutants exist in this world. The officials don't buy into Charles' presentation, and take everything as a joke. When Charles begins to read their minds and tell them that he knows about the missiles being placed in Turkey, the officials get alarmed and take Charles for a spy. Raven, who is also present in the room, shows her real self, and the officials are stunned, except for one CIA agent, who finds Raven and Charles to be fascinated. The 2 officials ask for the imprisonment of Charles and Raven, but the CIA agent tells them that he will be taking the mutants. Charles tells Moira that he is tailing Sebastian as much as she is, and he wants to stop Sebastian as soon as possible. The CIA agent tells Charles that he knew that people with unique abilities did exist in this world, and tells him that he has a secret facility named Division X, which Charles can use for this mission. Erik shows up on Sebastian's ship, and Sebastian is surprised to see that Erik has come all this way just to fight him. Emma uses her powers to control Erik's mind and kicks her off the ship. Before they can take out Erik properly, Charles and the rest of the team arrive on a ship of their own. Emma uses her powers to block Charles's powers, as both of them have the same abilities. The mutants start using their abilities to damage each other's ships. Sebastian and his mutants take out their submarine and escape from the attack of Charles's crew. Erik, not wanting to let Sebastian escape, uses his magnetism ability to swim towards Sebastian's submarine. Charles's abilities tell him that someone is out in the ocean, and he locates Erik. Even with all his abilities, Erik is on the verge of drowning. Knowing they don't have much time to save Erik, Charles jumps into the ocean and swims towards Erik to save him. Erik isn't letting go of Sebastian, but Charles uses his convincing power to make Erik let go. Erik learns that Charles is a mutant like him. The CIA agent takes the mutants to his facility, where they meet a young researcher named Hank. Charles uses his abilities to learn that Hank is a mutant too, but the CIA agent had no idea about this. Hank keeps his powers to himself, and reveals that his feet are actually a human's hands that allow him to climb anything effortlessly. The CIA agent claims that Sebastian might have joined hands with the Russians, and that could only lead to dangerous things for the whole world. Emma warns Sebastian of Charles's powers, and tells him that Charles can get inside Sebastian's mind and ruin his master plan. Sebastian doesn't fear this, as he has always been prepared for the worst. He introduces a helmet that the Russians made him. The helmet is specially designed to not let anyone read the mind of the person wearing it. As Emma has the same powers as Charles, she is unable to get inside of Sebastian's head. Raven gets close to Hank, and they begin to have friendly conversations. Hank tells her all about the serum he intends to make that would make him appear like a normal person. Raven requests Hank to create a serum that would make her appear like a normal person without her having to shape-shift into someone else. Hank believes that Raven's blood could lead to a cure for both of them. Before Raven and Hank can take things any further, Erik arrives and tells Raven that if he was her, he wouldn't change a thing about his appearance. Despite Raven disagreeing with Erik, she gets more confident on the inside. Hank gets jealous of Erik trying to impress Raven. Not wanting to take down Sebastian with a full team, Erik decides to leave so that he can get his hands on Sebastian himself. Charles arrives and lets Erik know that he could be a part of something bigger, and he knows what Erik has gone through in the past. He lets Erik know that he can go if he wishes, but he has a better chance to defeat Sebastian if he is with the rest of the team. The CIA agent tells Charles that Hank has turned the radar installation of the facility into a transmitter. Linking that transmitter with Charles's telepathic powers would allow Charles to find mutants near him. Erik arrives, and Charles is beyond excited to see that Erik has decided to stay. Erik says that if anyone has to find mutants, it is going to be him and Charles, because the mutants need to be discovered by their own kind first. Charles agrees, and they meet Hank to explain to Charles how this machine works. Hank has named this device Cerebro. Hank runs the machine on Charles, and it miraculously works. Charles and Erik head out to meet their first recruit, named Angel. Later, they recruit a mutant cab driver named Armando. Erik and Charles head to prison next, where they recruit a guy named Alex. Finally, Erik and Charles recruit a young man named Sean. At one point, Erik and Charles try to recruit Logan, who rudely brushes them off. Even though the Cerebro has helped Charles in finding many mutants around him, the frequency of the Cerebro has triggered Emma's telepathic powers and has made her aware that Charles and his team are recruiting many mutants. Sebastian tells Emma that he will take care of it before going to Russia and proceeding with their missile mission. Raven gets together with the new recruits and shares that all of them should have code names. Raven expresses that she would like to be called Mystique. Armando calls himself Darwin and shows his mutant powers to the rest of the team. He has the ability to adapt to any drastic situation. Sean showcases his powers of emitting incredibly strong ultrasonic screams and decides to call himself Banshee. Angel shows everyone that she has dragonfly wings and can spit out acidic saliva. While everyone might think that they have the most impressive powers, all of them are left stunned when they find out that Alex has the ability to absorb energy and discharge it as blasts. Alex decides to call himself Havoc. Moira persuades the rest of the CIA to let the mutants join the team and fight Sebastian, as he has many mutants with him too. The CIA lets the mutants in on the mission, but Erik is skeptical of the new mutants, as he believes they are not prepared for somebody dangerous like Sebastian. The CIA learns that Sebastian is meeting with the Russian defense chief in Moscow, and everyone needs to act soon. Moira, Charles, and Erik find the rest of the mutants fooling around, proving Erik's point that the new recruits aren't fully ready yet. Raven names Charles Professor X, and Erik, Magneto. Seeing Raven fool around like a small child makes Charles a bit disappointed, and he lets her know that he expects more from her. Charles, Erik, and the rest of the team follow Emma to the USSR, where she has arrived to meet a senior Soviet official. Emma wants to know the official's stance on the USA placing missiles in Turkey. When the official doesn't want to give up confidential information, Emma uses her powers to manipulate the official. An impatient Erik heads inside the house of the official, as he wants to put down Emma for good. Knowing Erik's action could lead to severe consequences, Charles follows after him before Erik can do something in anger. Erik powers his way through the guards, and he and Charles come face to face with Emma. As Charles's powers are similar to Emma's, he is unable to read her mind as she blocks him out. However, Emma can't outsmart Erik this time, and is put in severe agony. Erik uses his magnetism abilities to make Emma reveal the true plans of Sebastian. Emma is almost strangled by Erik's powers, but she still refuses to answer. Charles becomes uneasy with Erik torturing Emma, and he asks him to stop. Knowing she doesn't have any way out, she lets Charles read her mind. What Charles finds out makes him aware that things are more complicated, and worse, than the entire team imagined. Charles finds out that Sebastian plans on starting World War III, leading to mutant ascendancy. Sebastian plans on achieving this by installing missiles in Cuba that would ultimately lead to a war between the USA and Russia. Meanwhile, Sebastian and his mutants arrive at the facility, and they take out most of the CIA officials in a matter of seconds. Sebastian comes face to face with the new recruits and tries to talk to them in peace. He makes it clear to them that the government, or even humans, don't care about them, and how they shouldn't be wasting time doing something that won't benefit mutants in any way. Sebastian informs them that a revolution is coming, and the mutants will be dominating the whole world soon. This speech makes Angel attracted to Sebastian, and she joins his group immediately. Armando tries to stop Angel, as the rest know that Sebastian is clearly messing with everyone. When Angel doesn't listen to the rest, Armando and Alex take matters into their own hands, and Alex tries to blast Sebastian. However, what Alex doesn't know is that Sebastian can absorb that energy and use it to his advantage. Sebastian uses that energy to terminate Armando, and leaves with his mutants and Angel. Sebastian arrives in Moscow and persuades the Soviet general to have a missile site of their own, considering America is now going to place their missiles in Turkey. Sebastian suggests that Russia should consider Cuba as their place to position their missiles in retaliation, as Cuba is near the state of Florida. The general, knowing this could lead to war, tells Sebastian that it could never happen. Before the general can talk to other officials regarding what Sebastian proposed, Sebastian's mutants arrive, and things don't look that good for the general. Knowing how the new recruits are not ready to fight a force like Sebastian, Charles orders for the new mutants to be sent home immediately. Although Erik was the one who was against the idea of having untrained mutants fight alongside them, he now thinks that they need those mutants, as Sebastian has an army of his own. The U.S. officials have found out that Russia is putting their missiles in Cuba, and announced that when the ship carrying the missiles hits the embargo line, Russia will have automatically declared war against the U.S. Charles takes his mutants to his old house, where he will be helping everyone in training and controlling their powers. He trains Alex to take control of his powers, so that he can aim better while blasting energy charges. Charles also instructs Hank to use his feet in order to outrun anyone. Hank creates a special suit for Sean, and by using his ultrasonic screams, Sean is able to fly in it. Meanwhile, Charles helps Erik in using his powers perfectly. In order for that to happen, Charles gets inside Erik's mind, and accesses a memory of Erik having a beautiful time with his mother. Erik is moved, and tells Charles that he had forgotten about that memory. Charles tells Erik that there's a lot of good inside of Erik, and he can use that to harness his power perfectly. With Charles as motivation, Erik is able to use his powers to turn the face of a giant radar towards him. Hank has used Raven's blood to create a serum that would allow Raven to keep her appearance of a normal person, and Hank to change his feet to that of a normal person. Raven, thinking of what Erik told her before, tells Hank that she now doesn't feel that way, and asks him why the society can't accept them for what they are and what they look like. Hank still believes that the society would never think they are beautiful until they change their appearance completely. Erik and Charles sit down, and they talk about the mission. Erik is still bent on slaughtering Sebastian, but Charles claims that this will never bring him peace, as Erik would have to find that himself. Hank uses the serum on his feet, but it begins to have a massive side effect, to the point where he starts to change entirely. Raven enters Erik's room, and Erik lets her know that she is perfect in her real self, and she shouldn't even be thinking of changing herself at all. Raven turns to her real self for good, and she passionately makes out with Erik. The next day, the team gathers to head to Cuba, where the Russian ship will be arriving. Hank appears, and the group is shocked to see what has happened to the poor man. The side effects of the serum have given Hank blue fur and leonine aspect. Raven tells him that there's nothing wrong with it, and Hank should accept who he is. Russian ships are about to hit the embargo line, and the US forces have arrived as well. Before the Russians can hit the coast, Charles uses his powers to manipulate one of the generals on the ship and sends a missile at its allies. This allows for the US forces to slow down and process what is going on. Sean leaves the jet and uses his powers to find out that Sebastian and his crew are underwater in a submarine. Erik uses his powers to take out the submarine onto the coast. Sebastian has come up with a backup plan. He has created a nuclear reactor and has begun to absorb nuclear power that will turn him into a nuclear bomb. This could still lead to World War III. Something is blocking Charles's powers, and he instructs his entire team to find Sebastian and stop the nuclear reactor. Charles's team fights the mutants of Sebastian, and Erik is able to find the nuclear reactor and disable it for good. Erik is finally able to find Sebastian and tries to get revenge. Sebastian tells Erik that he doesn't have to fight him, and he can join hands and create a true revolution. Sebastian tells him that, despite what has happened between them in the past, he is proud of the man Erik has become. Erik professes that Sebastian is his creator and has made him strong. Erik uses his magnetism manipulation abilities to take off Sebastian's helmet, and Charles is able to reach Sebastian's mind and freeze him. Despite his hatred for Sebastian, Erik agrees with him that the mutants are the revolution, and they are meant to dominate the world. However, Erik can't forget that Sebastian murdered his mother, so Erik, in the cruel way possible, uses the same coin Sebastian gave him to slay him on the spot. Erik comes out wearing Sebastian's helmet and tells all of the mutants that they should be the ones dominating the world, and the real enemy are the humans, who will never understand them. The US ships are given the orders to fire at the mutants, and when the missiles are fired at them, Erik uses his powers to stop every single missile. Erik turns the trajectory of those same missiles towards the ships, as an act of a message to the whole world that the mutants are taking over. Every single one tries to stop Erik. Moira begins to shoot at Erik, but Erik accidentally deflects one bullet that hits Charles. Erik rushes to check in on Charles, and he is distracted to the point that his powers no longer control the missiles, which fall in the ocean. Erik tries to convince Charles that the world will never accept the mutants, and they want to turn them against each other, but Charles believes that Erik is too stubborn. Both Charles and Erik believe that they are not on the same page, and they have different views. Erik parts ways with Charles. Azazel, Riptide, Angel, and Raven leave with Charles, as they believe Erik is right with his view on the relationship between humans and mutants. Charles lets Raven leave, as he believes that's what Raven wants. Raven bids farewell to her brother for the time being. Sometime later, Charles is in a wheelchair, as he can't feel his legs anymore. He intends to open up a school for the mutants at his home, and Moira promises to never reveal Charles's home location to anyone. Moira bids farewell to Charles with a kiss, and Charles uses that kiss to wipe away Moira's memories, so that no one can find Charles and his mutants. Erik finds Emma and wants to recruit her into his team. Erik now prefers to call himself Magneto, indicating that he and Charles will meet again, not as friends but as foes.